Welcome to Divisionalysis. I'm Fog. PTS Phase 2 has just been completed. I missed Phase 1, but I saw footage of people testing in Phase 1, and then I saw the whinging that followed Phase 1, and Phase 2 came out, and I was definitely keen to get in there and have a look at the things that we knew were changing, but also investigate some of the things that I had a suspicion might be changing that weren't going to be advertised. Along with doing the normal tests, like spending a million exotic components on getting my Eagle Bearer to have DTOC, I also did a lot of other stuff which you could potentially find very interesting and gives us a feel of what might be dropping after TU20. Let's go. Now I did the normal testing that everybody else probably did and checked out the weapons just to confirm some of the maths that I'd already done in the background, but I also did some other testing. In this case I'm testing reload speed. The Eagle Bearer was getting a change. I wanted to see whether or not its reload speeds had been adjusted. Now in the live current version of the game, the Eagle Bearer has the same reload speed from attack reload as it does from empty. Nothing seemed to change there in regards to the PTS. I also wanted to check the F2000, obviously with its upgrade to its magazine size. I wanted to see if there were any other changes. The two on the right are the TAC reload, the two on the left are the standard reload, and as with all weapons other than the Eagle Bearer, the reload from empty is slower than a reload from not empty or a TAC reload. Certainly nothing has changed there, but when I actually delved into the time, it looks like the F2000 might have received a very small nerf to its reload speeds. We'll wait to see after TU20 drops. I also looked at some of the talents as well. They have amended some of the wordage and the nomenclature when it comes to the talents. You can see that the impact damage talents like Flatline and Eyeless and Ignited are all now displaying amplified like they are. I also wanted to test things like Sledgehammer, see if there was any changes there. After PTS 1, most people had agreed that Flatline was still an amplified damage, even with the threats in the notes of it being added weapon damage. I wanted to check whether or not it was possibly going to be additive with Spotter as well, so that might have been a change that I was looking for. Still amplified, but additive amplified with Spotter. 158452 was my standard bullet, and if both were amplified, so both received the full 15%, then I should see a figure of 209552 on a non-crit, and it was 209552. So both Spotter and Flatline were still 15% amplified. I checked Intimidate, one that we knew was going to be changing, and this is me outside the PTS in the normal game version. I was getting some baseline numbers. And then I just damaged myself so I could use a Gunner medkit to activate the bonus armor required for Intimidate. What you can see here in the current game, the speed at which the 8 stacks builds up. And then I just looked at the difference between the non-crit, 217, 206 and 147 without the buff, 147, 013. Which means that in the current version of the game, full stack of Intimidate works out to be 47.7% increase on damage. Now the way that that works is that it is a multiplicative 5% for every stack. So it is 1.05 to the power of 10. Oh, sorry, of 8 in this case. 1.4774. So each stack is multiplicative with the last stack. So I wanted to see if that was still the case in the PTS. Getting some baseline numbers, I wanted to also check it with Vigilance to see if it was total weapon damage as opposed to amplified. It is still amplified, but you can see that the speed at which those new stacks grow is considerably faster. And when you divide it by the baseline, you get 48.02%. So a 0.03% change from the live version, and the way that that works out is 1.04, or the 4%, to the power of 10 now, being 48%. So the hopes of it being more powerful in the PTS it will be an indistinguishable difference at the top end, but you will definitely notice the speed with which those stacks grow. Sledgehammer, I wanted to see if they've made any adjustments here. Obviously it says damage to armor. I wanted to see and test if it still was damage to armor plates. There's no change there. It is still damage to armor and damage to armor plates in the PTS. I also did some testing in relation to Optimist. Optimist is calculated in a very weird way in the normal game. Wanted to see if that was still coded the same when we hit the PTS. As it turns out, it is coded exactly the same way, but now in F2000 with 60 rounds, it actually works out to be almost normal, in that it is 0.5% for every single bullet across the 60 bullets in the magazine, totaling the 30% damage when you reach that final bullet. With the shield splinterer, which offers 4% for every 10% of the magazine missing, it works the same way as it does in the current version, which is that it's 0.5% per bullet as a base, but then depending on the number of bullets in the magazine, or in the case of the shield splinterer, which with a higher amount per 10% of the magazine missing, the coding will add in a 1% damage bullet at a regular interval. In the case of the shield splinterer in the new version with a 60 round magazine, that works out to be 1% bullet, or a 1% added damage every 3 bullets or so. And it produces these wonky lines, and you can see the difference between pre-TU20 and post-TU20 as to how the Optimist will apply to those weapons. Now, there was also supposed to be some quality of life changes in regards to mods. Now, my understanding of how it was written is that I was only going to require one maxed out mod, and I should be able to apply that to all of my gear pieces, meaning that I only need one max mod for any given character. But I have one 10% pulse mod available, and when I try to equip that one pulse to both my chest and my mask, it removes one. So I'm not sure if that's coming into U20, whether it was worded poorly or if it just didn't apply to this PTS. Not sure, but it certainly wasn't working as I thought it was intended to work. So Descent got a revamp as well, all intended to drop in TU20. The NSA vendor, so you will have seen this in other content creator stuff, but you can now purchase the uniforms as apparel. This is where in the PTS you got your Vindicator from, the new rifle. And of course I did some testing, but you can watch anybody else's YouTube stuff in regards to what the Vindicator does and what it's going to do and all the rest of it. I found it most interesting that you could now purchase named items and exotic caches from the NSA vendor, and as you can see here, I've already got like 30,000 NSA credits worked up. I know some of my friends have got like 100,000. Get into Descent now and you will be able to crank up those exotic components when TU20 drops. The talent pool available will now only be on a 6-hour rotation with limited talents available. The groupings are all based, or at least named, on the 7 deadly sins. From what I could tell, there was only 3 on the rotation in the PTS. That was Greed, Gluttony and Envy. And amongst those 3, I discovered 4 new exotic talents that are going to be available and dropping into U20. They all mightn't seem great at first sight, but when you put a little thought into it, some of these could be some of the go-to talents in either solo or in group play. The thing is that they might not be available in every rotation. So I did check that. What I also looked at was the heat gauges for each of the room types. In the current version, you're looking at 6% for an easy and 4% for a hard. I think it's the same 3% for very hard. But what that means is that at 6% maximum in the current version times 4 rooms in each loop means that you can get a maximum of 24% per loop, meaning that you require a minimum of 5 loops in order to reach the Nemesis. But now with 7% as an easy and 5% as a hard, 28% possible from each loop means that you can make it to the Nemesis now in just 4 loops. It's going to be a really good way to, it may be the best way to farm. The Nemesis is guaranteed to get you an exotic cache. Plus you've got a chance at a reconstructed cache for those named item blueprints, which is why I've been running Descent lately. And then also now you have the exotic caches for sale at the NSA vendor. Super way to get those components.
Simulation terminated.
Okay, this takes me to the last topic that I'm going to cover in regards to the PTS, and it was the one that I was most interested in investigating, and possibly the most controversial when it came to developer changes and what I consider to be the future of the game. Concerning the power creep, majority of weapons that we saw were receiving a buff, so the power creep was inevitable. Every weapon was going to be more powerful, we were more powerful, so essentially the NPCs were receiving a nerf. Now there are a number of different ways that developers would normally deal with this, and when I saw the first PTS I was actually very excited, because what I saw the developers do was take a different tack to what would normally occur. So they've changed, well at least with PTS 1, they changed the dynamics of the game by removing the shield peak glitch, which was unnaturally extending the ability of a red build to be able to deal damage. So by removing that, that was a great start. Make it harder in that way. But then I also saw an unadvertised change which everybody whinged like little girls about, and that was the removal of the one-shot protection. The life-saving mechanism that unnaturally preserves a sliver of health for you to prevent you from taking that last portion of damage to give you time to get back into cover. I thought this was a really smart play. Obviously all of the new gear sets were health oriented, and the removal of that one-shot protection would make it necessary for people to think about either investment in more armor or more health and make it more difficult, so offset the damage increase in that way. I liked it, but then the whinging and people threatening to uninstall the game if this stays in. The one thing that I was most excited about, it seems that they've bowed to pressure and they have removed it. I did a lot of testing. Every time that I thought that I might have seen a difference between the PTS and normal play, it turns out it was probably just RNG or the amount of damage that was being received or something of the like. I tested it in general gameplay, I tested it in legendary, every way that I could. The only real significant change is the speed at which the revive hive gets you up, which is significantly faster. And as I went through the PTS, I was more and more disappointed in the fact that I couldn't detect any change that was going to counteract the power creep. Essentially, all the changes coming with Project Resolve was just going to make the game easier. And for veterans of the game like myself with over 3,000 hours, the point to the game, it loses its interest, it loses its value. There's no challenge left in the game. But then I went outside of Washington, and this is what I discovered. These two standard red enemies. Now, if you saw my enemy health points video, you know that a standard red enemy is 2.827 million worth of EHP, or effective health points. These two enemies here, if we bracket the damage that's been done to them, what you can see is that, at least in this mission, and there was a couple of others, Black Tusk only though, that I could find, the enemy health for a standard red was somewhere between 3.3 and 3.5 million. That represented somewhere around a 20% increase on their base health. And if you also saw that enemy health points video that I made, you also know that you can work out what the base health of a standard enemy is by investigating explosions, and that's what I did. This drone operator, the explosion, 3.448980. And explosions on a grenadier, 3 of them, totaling 3.448980. Falls in line with the bracketing. So fairly confident, 3.448980. It represents a 22% increase on the base health for enemies. This track also a rusher. This rusher here, its health has to be somewhere between 2.15 and 2.6. And if we were to add 22% to the normal in the current game, 1.884, you would get 2.299 million. So it seems like every Black Tusk enemy, at least outside of Washington, had received a 22% buff to its health. There were also some other strange variations as well. What I saw was that purple grenadiers or purple drum raiders had an explosion value that was 10% more than a red, and elite explosions were now 20% more than a red. But I couldn't detect the same variance in their health values. So very interesting to see what falls out of this. The developers have a couple of different methods in which to counteract the most obvious power creep that has come with TU20 and at least what we've been shown in the PTS, and that is to change the way that we currently play the game or the mechanics of the game by removing the shield glitch, and by removing one-shot protection you then change the dynamics of the game to be more cover-based focused, or a slight investment in armor or health, which then reduces and offsets the damage increase that weapons have been given. Or you do what has traditionally been done and you increase the damage of the weapons and you also increase the health points of the enemies. Everything is speculation at the moment, of course. Nothing is set in stone until that title update 20 drops on the 6th of February. There is a lot of water to flow under the bridge between now and then. Obviously there's feedback coming in of PTS 2. What the developers do with it is going to be very interesting, and it could either set the conditions or it could break the back of the future of the Division 2 whilst we wait for the highly anticipated Division 3. Comment down below on what you think of the upcoming changes, the potential upcoming changes. Also comment if you think that there was something that I missed from the PTS or something that you would like to know about. I might have actually looked into it already through the PTS. I might have footage of it that I can look into. So throw those comments down the bottom, hit the like button. And a couple of videos ago people said that they wanted to see gameplay. Well, you can watch out the rest of the video, which is me running solo legendary on the PTS. Let's see what happens. If you like the video, then like it. If you want to see more stuff leading up to and post TU20 when it drops, I'll be there with the calculations to give you my opinion on what is going to be the best weapon and to investigate more firmly what changes have actually occurred in the game, both notified and unnotified as well. Anyway, I will see you in the next one. Log out.